to Purple Octopus. From House Studios, this is a show for discovering wholeness in a fractured world.
I'm John Buck, decision maker.
I'm Karen Gimnig, relating.
I'm Laureen Golden, developing humans.
And I'm François Knuchel, paradigm shifting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Purple Octopus. I'm Karen Gimnig, and I'm here with Laureen Golden, John Buck, and François Knuchel. And Laureen is going to share with us today. Laureen is a trusted guide to visionary leaders who are developing the people and organizations our world is asking for. And she is going to talk to us today about relationships as containers for work. So Laureen, I'll hand it off to you, and I think you have a screen to share.
Yes, thank you. All right. So today I wanted us to invite us on a journey to explore relationships as containers for work. And I am really basing this off of the metrics this group has come up with around a multi-mind and like a group's capacity to know when they're in that way of being, that they're kind of acting as a single organism or octopus. And two of the metrics that we've discussed is power with and also joyful engagement. And so what I'm going to talk today is just using a lot of the groups that I'm in as laboratories, like just noticing what are groups that are, especially around joyful engagement, like what is it that they're doing that I think might be supportive of that. So the first thing that I just wanted to say, like we talked about the conditions of power with, and Karen, I think this was you specifically, but just saying like it's difficult to achieve power with through structures alone. That structures, yes, they can support it, but there's something more than that. And you kind of actually need to learn to feel it and attune to when you're actually doing power with. And these groups that are successful are the ones that are attuning to it. And when they attune to it and like writing things, that they are the ones that are achieving that presence or awareness of wonder, a reintegration of spirit into work, joy, and elation. And that was one of the metrics. Is this clear so far what I'm talking about? Okay. So just to set a quick context for this, I love that thing from Dr. Maureen O'Hara of the International Futures Forum, who says psychologically we were raised in a world that no longer really exists. We have a new world we need to navigate. So just to kind of name the two worlds, like the world that many of us were raised to navigate was a world where we achieved order by exerting control. So I sometimes refer to that as a coercive world. But, this was a world of experts and people who needed their help, of adults and children. But the structure that humans were, like the pattern of organizing humans were organized around was around power over, power under. And in that, if you look at it, it's kind of like my needs, like maybe it's a boss's needs, and the employee is very much focusing on the boss's needs. So there's like a tracking of like one set of needs, and it was the person who was empowered. And groups really were tracking, like, are we getting our work done? And this new world that we're tipping into where like, predictability is harder and harder to find, and we're being faced with so much uncertainties and unknowns, and we're actually needing to get much more like new answers and discover new things. And so this other way of getting order, of allowing it to emerge from chaos, is I think what this new world is about. And so I sometimes refer to this new world as a chaotic world. And again, the new world is a both end. So it's, you both want the ability to allow order to emerge. And then there's also times that, we're going to put order in here through control. So, it's just this dance between both of these. But within this new world, especially like if you think about organizations and leaders that are saying we don't have the answers, we actually need to find more, get more creativity, get better strategy. So they're trying to bring different stakeholders to the table. And you see a trend of like flattening structures and more shared leadership. And this new way of organizing is around power with. And I just want to be really explicit that when you are doing power with, that there's actually two needs that are being tracked. And so if you look at it from a dyad perspective, like each person is tracking my needs and your needs, my needs and your needs. And so there's a tracking of two sets of needs. And the other thing, again, the both ends, so my needs and your needs, another both end that these successful groups are doing is they are tracking work. Are we getting work done? They are absolutely effective at getting work done. And they're also tracking the relationship as a container of work. And when something is going off the rails, they're the ones that are stopping work to do something about it. And so there's a concept that a mentor, Simon Copsey, told me about, but from the Toyota production system called the and-on cord. And basically, if the cord was pulled, it was basically a cord that ran above the production line. And if that cord was pulled, all work stopped. And it's pretty cool because anyone had the right to pull the cord. So talk about egalitarian, anyone could pull the cord. And if the cord was pulled, the leader would come over and the team would come around and they would explore why was the cord pulled and then work together to solve the problem. And what's really fascinating about it is it wasn't that they had a right to do it. They actually felt that people had an obligation. If you discover a problem, you're obligated to stop. And the reason why they really promoted this is because if you can get the problem at the source, when it is still small, it is so more effective to address the issue. And so the groups that I'm noticing that are really able to stay in that joyful engagement, that sense of spirit and elation, are groups that are pulling a metaphorical and-on cord in their groups. And I'm noticing these groups of people tend to have members that are very self-aware and self-responsible. So like, they'll be like, wait a second, that didn't feel very good right there. And then there's this process of teasing apart, like, what's mine, what's mine, what's mine? And it's just a beautiful way of cleaning it up. And so these groups are not only learning about the work that they're doing, but they're learning each other. And so if you think about like a circle as like a basket or a container, like they're really weaving the connections and knowing each other well, which creates this really sturdy container. And so, you know, in the old world, I think we had a sense of linearity, you know, happily ever after. We kind of thought a relationship and then just happily ever after. And I think people who are really standing with 2 feet in this new world are working more with cycles and recognizing that there is a cycle of human interaction around harmony, disharmony, and repair. And this comes out of like attachment theory and, you know, just studies done with parents and young children. But even in the most loving relationships, there's periods of harmony, and then there's a natural shift into disharmony. And then there's an ability to repair. And I think in the old world, we tended to be very afraid of conflict. We shoved it under the rug, we minimized it. I think people sacrificed their needs so that like the group could just keep going. But in this new world, you know, that disharmony is just aired, and that people believe that they can move from breakdown into breakthrough, and that the belief that like you can actually get stronger from the broken places. And so just the last thing, like this is my last slide, but just I have this sense of VUCA, you know, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Like we are going beyond the little shores that we are familiar with. We are heading out into the unknown as groups. And I see groups and teams and organizations like you really are a spaceship. And like, and yes, looking at the work that you're getting done is really important. But as you're out in outer space, that thing that is holding you together, that is actually holding your work, matters. And if it was a spaceship and you're out in outer space and like something started to click and make noise, you would know like your survival really depends on addressing this. So just wanting to say that like, you know, the mutual tracking of both the relationship as well as the work that is being done, the mutual tracking of your needs and my needs, that these are the things that groups that I am in that are able to attune and actually feel like they're doing power with. They're not just structurally power with. That's the difference that is making a difference. So with that, I open it up to you guys for your thoughts.
Thanks, Laureen. So I propose we do a round here, and maybe we'll go John and then me and then François and then finish with Laureen again.
Okay, Thanks. So I liked your picture, Laureen, about the two people with the little lemniscate, you know, the figure 8 on its side with some sort of, you know, flow going back and forth between your needs and my needs. What occurred to me was missing from that was a lemniscate in the middle that was the needs of something about the relationship, and it's like when you get two people together, there's a third thing happening in the space between. And so my complaint as a user out here of your material is that there was no lemniscate in the middle of those figures. But I'm not sure, is it the needs of this group, of this multi-mind group? And what are those needs and how do they get expressed? That would take some conversation.
Yeah, I think there's a fascinating thing about needs, and I think that sort of, maybe it's the old world view or maybe it's just what I grew up with, but this idea that the reason I would meet your needs is because I'm generous, because I'm kind, because I'm virtuous, because it's a good thing for me to do. Like, those are the reasons. And those are probably good reasons, like that's okay. But my sort of growing awareness about this is that it actually serves a much higher and more important function, which is that when I engage with your needs, I learn things about myself. And that in meeting the needs of somebody else and paying attention to the thing that somebody else is saying, hey, I need to pull this cord, to use that metaphor, that it's not just that I help them, it's that I help all of us. And to take that even a step further, the harder it is for me to do it, the more challenging I find it, the more like angst producing, or the more hesitant I am in a lot of ways. I mean, you want to put some discernment around this, but in general, the more difficult it is for me to sort of engage and meet that need, the more beneficial it will turn out to be for me, because that discomfort is about a piece of me that wants to grow and is trying to and ready to, but I didn't see it. And it was your willingness to express your need that showed it to me. And so I just think there's this whole different perspective on, it's not just, am I generous enough to meet your need? Is there a symbiosis happening where meeting your need is going to grow me? And I do want to just say that sometimes that's not the case. Like, there are times that we need to say, yep, that's your need and it's not mine. And, you know, it's not the thing for this group to do. But most of the time, I think that leaning in creates this beautiful thing in the relationship that isn't actually the thing we started out looking for. So that's kind of what struck me about what you were saying. François?
Thank you. Yeah, so you referred to the old world, or the world that we've come from, where we grew up, and the new world that's coming up. And I think well, in that context, there's a shift taking place also in the view of humans, of who we are. And that's illustrated by your story, by the Andon illustration. So the Andon principle, when Toyota production system was first introduced in the West in the 1990s, 80s and 90s, the Andon part of the manual was completely missing. It wasn't there, but so they were introducing piecemeal parts of the Toyota, but things were left out, and the Andon was one of the things that was left out, and that surprised me a lot. But then, of course, I realized very quickly, why is it missing? It's because it went one step too far in terms of what's acceptable to management, because the idea that you could have anybody in the workforce, in the company, who could just sabotage, and that's the way they interpreted it, sabotage the whole company by just putting the code, that was just a one step too far. So that was just left out completely initially. And fundamentally, it sort of illustrates, in order for the Andon principle to work, it has to operate with a completely different mindset, because the andon is based on a mindset which says other humans, we can trust other humans. Other humans are, they're not good, but they are basically good, and we need to trust them. Whereas the old way of looking at things is that most people cannot be trusted, and therefore they need to be controlled, and that's the old management, the old style of management, and which is further sort of brought to light when this idea there are some people in an organization who do the thinking, and the rest do this. So there are only certain people who are supposed to be doing the thinking, and the rest are not. And so, for whatever reasons, because they're not capable, or and they're not given the power. And this is what Toyota actually really turned around completely, because they said everybody has to be doing the thinking. It's not the remit of just a few people at top. And it's a particular problem in the West, because we have a long tradition of separating body and mind, and the two are related. So you in this particular case, you got the few managers who have got the mind, and then the rest of the people have got the bodies who actually do things, and the doers are not supposed to be doing any thinking. In fact, I remember when I was a young employee, I was told many times, do what you're told. You're not supposed to be thinking. So it's a different mindset. And as I was going to say, and this is the shift that's taken place, because that old mindset doesn't work anymore in the world of VUCA, in the world of complexity and everything, and that's what needs to change. So and it's got to do with trusting others, so that we can work it out in a symbiotic way together. And so the relationship is important. It's not just about execution; it's about relationship. But the key word there, I think, is also trust. I stop there, because otherwise I carry on for too long.
François, Laureen?
So a couple of reactions from what has been spoken, but just John, yes, wanting to say that when two or more people are present, there's something else present as well. And so to think about how to include that in the illustration, I would love that challenge. So I will circle back to you guys on that. François, I'm going to land most with Karen's thing, but just François, I'm appreciating you really amplifying that this is really about a different mindset, and like trust is a huge one. And also, and I didn't see this as clearly as like how we have separated, just even in organizations, the mind from the body. Like from education, I know in school we do that, but I didn't see how organizationally, role-wise, function-wise, we've been doing that. And I agree with you. In VUCA, like we need everybody thinking and doing and seeing and sensing. So just, it's interesting. I think Karen, the thing, one of the things that you said that really landed, one is just treat this with care. Cause like, yes, there are, if you are not working on your own inner development, you know, there's some people who could hijack a group. And I think we've all experienced a group being hijacked by someone insisting that their needs trump and pay attention to my needs. And so I just want to acknowledge that, like the both endness around this, and like that would be a time of letting it go. And I think what I really got from you, that I think it was around the thing about it's the hardest thing, but I think what I'm noticing about the new world is the people who are most successful are people who are coming together to develop each other's capacity, and this sense that like we all need to change and fast. And I need mirrors. Like there's only so much I can see about myself, and it is only when I rub up against another, you know, or behind me, like someone, I loved this term, but just around social justice, but tell me when my underwear is hanging out. Like a lot of times we don't know, and it's a courtesy. So there's something around like a hygiene and just, you know, or just stuff, but it's a courtesy almost to be helping each other see ourselves. And so the last thing, and this is what I heard within you, and tell me if I got you wrong, Karen, but just the members of these groups, and they're growing each other, but yeah, they're wanting, you know, someone told me there's a difference between solicited and unsolicited feedback, but members of these groups are asking for feedback. Like, when I'm stepping on your toe, I want to know it, because I want to, and because I'm not just stepping on your toe. If I step on someone's toe, I know I'm stepping on other people's toes, and I want to know when I'm stepping on toes so I can stop stepping on toes. So that's what came up for me.
Yeah, I think we have time for another round. John, what are you thinking? John, if you'll unmute yourself.
Thank you. I was thinking that the lemniscate should have our needs, our needs. But then what's the back and forth? So it's something about our needs, or individuals' needs and our needs. And how do you identify the group's needs? And I was looking at the picture of the spaceship and thinking, all I can see is the mechanical container there. I can't see the relationships inside that spaceship. And so the hour is very ambiguous and not clear. It's hard to picture. And maybe it can't be pictured. Maybe it's too ephemeral, but then it's real also. I was looking at a wonderful video the other day about the song "The Woman from Ipanema," and if you'll think about it, it's da 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 da. But when the actual original rendition of it, it was a very haunting thing with lots of echoes and vibrations, and they showed the picture of the woman's face was sort of like not exactly clear. It's almost like that's what we're dealing with when we talk about the relationships in the container and our needs. It's very hard to pin down. So being able to surf that difficulty of pinning down what's our needs is kind of what the challenge is, I think. And I think it comes out when you start saying, you know, something's not right here, let's poke at it. But what happens out of that is very complicated, very complex rather. So it's hard to put in a slide, it's hard to picture. There's another dimension that slide doesn't get when you go into our needs. Like a three-dimensional lemniscate or something. So that's the image that came up for me.
Yeah, I was struck by, François, your piece about when we don't trust, and particularly when we sort of don't trust the character of humanity in a way. Like, we don't trust that people are well-intentioned and good people and will generally choose good things, that our instinct is to control. And that piece about it, if they're not doing what I want them to do, how do I make them do it? And I get client groups ask me this all the time. How do we make those people do their share of the work? Or how do we make them? And my response is, do you want to? Like, I know you want them to do the thing, but do you want to make them? And what is that when it isn't from a place of control, which is fundamentally coercion? We don't like the word coerce, but that is actually what we mean when we say, how do we make them? How do we do a thing that coerces or forces or makes them do a thing they wouldn't do on their own? And if we let go of that as a strategy, if we say making them isn't a choice, controlling them is outside of our value set, it's outside of what we believe works, because when we make them, we're breaking down the relationship. We're actually breaking down the container within which work happens. That's what control does. And so then what happens if we say that maybe we can't make them, maybe we can invite or entice or get vulnerable and sort of use the relationship as a way to let them know, like invite them into a relationship, and maybe that will change whether they do that thing. Or maybe we're all better off with them doing that thing that we wish they wouldn't do, than we would be if we're trying to force them, even if we were successful at forcing them to change their behavior. The cost of that forcing is just too great, so we don't. And where does that put us? And how do we get creative and lean into relationships and build trust, so that we're back into that cycle of that we don't trust, and so we must control, and in controlling we break down trust. So what if we switch it and say we're going to put our energy into trusting and being trustworthy and safe in relationships, and then and that the way we do that is we decide we're not controlling. That's not our solution. So what solutions then emerge in that space where trust can thrive? So that's what's coming up for me. But I think it's so true that our conventional approach to I don't feel safe, I don't trust is I must control. François?
So I personally think that control and coercion is actually an act of violence. And there's a tremendous amount of violence that's actually, from that perspective, that's going on in our organizations, in our society. Another way of looking at relationships we're brought up almost to tend to look at things as independent. So you've got one thing here on the left, you've got another thing there, and saying, okay, this is one thing, this is another thing, but the two are not related. But actually, there's a different way of looking at that. You could say, okay, let's inverse everything. Let's turn the world inside out in the same way that you would a negative or a negative of a photograph. It reverses everything. So instead of looking at the two things, you look at the space in between the two things. And if you start looking at the space of the two things, it's impossible to say that the two are independent, because if the one thing does something, it actually changes something to that space between. The space between changes, and so if you look at it from the space point of view, and you can imagine that, for example, if you went into the water, and we can actually see, normally in the air, we can't see things, so we tend not to see the relationship. But if you went into the water, you could see the movement of water as people are moving around, but because we can actually see the water as human beings. We can see the water, and my guess is that fish, when they get out of the water, they can see the air in a way that we can't. It's sort of reversing in and out the two, and then looking at the relationship and the connectedness and the interdependence of things. If you look at what's between, rather than looking at independent things. And we tend to look at people as independent things, and independent bodies. We tend to look at things as independent. This is the way we've been sort of brought up. And in actual fact, it has a lot to do with vision, because vision tends to say, "I'm here. The world is out there." Another exercise that I've done with people is to ask them to close their eyes and hear the world rather than see it. If you're hearing the world, you are in the middle of it. It's not out there, you're in it. But if you're looking at the world, it's tend to be I and it. So we need to shift our perceptions and refocus on other alternative ways of perceiving. Again, I'm taking too much time. Thank you.
Thanks, François. Laureen?
I would end just with gratitude. Like, thank you for looking at this with me. It was fun to step back into the metrics, and I'm richer for this discussion. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thanks for being with us for Purple Octopus.